Representative Derby, great to see you today. How are you?
Great, Scott. Thank you. Glad to be here, and thanks for all you do in the community.
Well, it's an honor to get to work with Black Hills Habitat all these years. And you know what, this conversation really is within the context of what I'm calling conversations around strengthening South Dakota. And as a local representative and as one who's running for office again, I think, you know, you have a particular important voice right now. And I thought it'd be wonderful to just get a few minutes here with you to talk about what's on your mind. And of course, in my world, I'm always thinking housing, you know, that's coming. So, but, you know, in light of our state's issues, I mean, we've got huge issues with water. We've got issues with tourism that you're really involved with, of course, military affairs. Maybe before we jump into the nitty gritty of some of those things, maybe just give us a quick thumbnail sketch of who is Mike Derby. You know, you've been in the legislature many years. This is what, your fifth or sixth run approximately?
Yep, I'm running for my fifth term.
Okay. And boy, you're just a hard worker, always in Pierre and always voting. And we so appreciate that representation with District 34. But maybe you could just give us a little description of who is Mike Derby.
Sure. Thanks, Scott. Well, our family moved to Rapid City in 1965, and then we moved into a house on Central and Lanark in 68. Grew up there, and as a matter of fact, I own that house now. So my mom lived in it for the entire time. She just passed away last year, and we kept the house in the family and went to Meadowbrook Grade School, West Junior High when they had junior highs. Graduated from Stevens High School. So I've lived in District 34 almost my entire life. And that's basically West Rapid City. Now it's with redistricting. Skyline Drive to the west pushes down towards Red Rock, which is not included anymore. And then north part of West Rapid. And so this will be, if I'm reelected here, my fifth term. I served 3 terms under Governor Bill Janklow, and that was quite an experience back in the day there. I served on appropriations, and I was vice chair of appropriations when I left Pierre, and took about an 18-year hiatus and got back into the game here last term. I'm currently on tax and transportation, and also on the executive board, which is basically the board of directors of the legislature. I served on that before, and I was reelected to that. And we take care of business outside of the regular legislative session.
Sure. Well, you've got a great voting record and attendance record in Pierre. I don't think there's anybody that outworks Mike Derby, that's for sure.
Thank you.
And we appreciate your history here. I mean, I moved here to Rapid City 17 years ago. And, you know, one of the things I loved about Rapid was, you know, the size of the city and the proximity, of course, to the Black Hills, but also affordability. You know, I moved here from California. I'm one of those guys. I actually grew up in the Chicago area, but moved here from Southern California, and it was really affordable. You could buy a 1,000 square foot house for $90,000 to $100,000, and now we're seeing those same homes, you know, $225,000 to $300,000, and so that cost per square foot has gone up so much, and it's made things more challenging here for a lot of people. But before we get into the housing specific, I just wanted to give you a chance. I mean, what's on the top of Representative Derby's mind right now as you're running, and as you're looking at the needs of our state and the opportunities? What's on your mind?
Well, thanks. That's a great question, and I agree with you. And I appreciate the compliment, but I've always found I always get back more than I give. And so it's really good. I've been involved with the Chamber of Commerce and all sorts of things. And you know what? It's a blessing, and I enjoy doing it. And I'm always, as I said, I always get back more than I give. The Main thing I've been working on actually has to do with property tax relief, because when I was out and about campaigning, that's the number one item I've heard over and over was our property taxes have gone up because the sales in the market have dramatically increased. Those become the comps for the county assessor.
Yeah.
And so one thing leads to another. And so with that thought in mind, we did have a summer study committee on property tax structure and tax burden. And I requested to be on that committee. We met 4 times this summer. So when someone asks you, how did you spend your summer vacation? I spent it in Pierre working on property tax. And our committee realized that we are not going to leave that committee without doing and attempting something. And so then I did work with a couple other legislators, and I was the prime proponent of a bill that we got out of committee, which will actually was a 10-3 vote, and now it goes to the executive board. And then if it's approved there, it goes to the legislature next session. But what it does specifically is it reduces the assessed value on the first, takes away the first $100,000 of assessed value. And so it's kind of a bottom-up approach. Those that are the lower priced homes would receive a bigger percentage of help than the higher priced homes. And then the mechanism is through the school levy. We would reduce the school levy. And then because of the robust economy in the state of South Dakota, we would backfill that with general funds. And so that way it leaves the school harmless and it leaves the counties whole, but it does give property tax relief for those that need it the most. It'll be the biggest property tax relief program since Governor Janklow did his over 30 years ago. Pretty excited about that.
Fantastic. Well, and as a home builder here and, working with families that are on that lower end of the spectrum, I tell you, the income spectrum, it's a huge issue. And so you're dead on working on that. Thank you for doing that. And it sounds like a real creative approach. I know I've visited with Shannon Rittenberg a bit about the process and how the mill levy works. And obviously, with those increased values, I would imagine the mill levy should be reducing. But there's a lot of factors at play, and it's I think a very misunderstood part of the way our county works here in the western part of the state. So thank you for working on that for our entire state. I think that's wonderful, wonderful news.
Thank you.
As kind of touching on the housing issue a little bit more, because we don't have a ton of time here, but one of the things that I know you worked really hard on last year in the legislature was HB 1033. And I know that that was those funds, $200 million was appropriated to South Dakota Housing. And as far as I understand, Representative, I don't know that any of those funds have actually gotten into the field and gotten used the way we need them to be used to address this housing crisis. And I use the term housing crisis. I think others identify with that, but being in the affordable housing space, we really see it because the families that we serve, for instance, most of them can afford up to about $150,000 to $175,000 for a home, but that's over 30 years on a 0% mortgage, right? And that home that they're trying to get is appraising for $250,000, $275,000. So there's a huge gap there. Organizations like Habitat can help fill that gap because we're nonprofit, but we need to do something really different to attract not just the nonprofit into that space, but the for-profit. So I know that's a lot of the reasons HB 1033 was passed in the first place. And so, some of us out here are wondering, hey, why aren't we able to use those funds yet? And where are we at? Where do you think it's going as we move forward here?
Well, you're right. That was one of the bigger issues that we worked on during session. I was very proud to get that out of the gate. I'm very disappointed that it hasn't been put out on the street, or as I should say, under the streets, because it was literally a workforce housing infrastructure fund. And I did talk to Representative Chase, who was a prime sponsor in the House, this morning for an update.
Okay,
And
great.
you're right, we haven't been able to move the funds out. And the big discussion has been, is it housed in South Dakota Housing or GOED, Governor's Office of Economic Development? We felt that South Dakota Housing Development Authority was the place to do it, because that's what they do on a day-to-day basis. And
Yeah,
that's why we really pushed for that. There also seems to be quite a discussion about, is it only for low-income housing, or will it be used for just a wide spectrum of development?
sure.
You know, anything from apartments, on single family,
Yeah,
on and on, without an income requirement. So apparently that's been a sticking point too.
okay.
Representative Chase did say it's coming back to session. He's working very hard with Senator Crabtree to get something resolved. We're working with the governor's office. They have their opinion on how they want to move this forward, and the House and Senate have their opinion.
Sure.
We thought we had it ready to go, but obviously South Dakota Housing doesn't want to do anything if there's, for example, a threat of any kind of litigation or anything.
Sure.
So we're
Well,
going to take
yeah.
a hard look at it again, and
Yeah.
I'm sorry as of today that it's not out there.
No, and I appreciate that, and thank you for checking in with your colleagues who are helping lead the charge on that. And you know, we all know that housing is expensive because of, you know, it's the dirt, you know, and it's the infrastructure, and it's certainly the materials and the subcontractors. So, you know, having a chunk of that, you know, about a quarter of that taken care of with this infrastructure funding, you know, is a big deal. And I think a lot of folks were depending upon that. So thank you for your work on that as we move forward, and we'll keep talking about it, keep pursuing, you know, the resolution we need. One other thing specific on housing, Representative, is thinking about the Housing Opportunity Fund. And that was something we worked on with Governor Dugard back in 2012, 13. And that came together really to fund home renovations, you know, work within the affordable housing spectrum. And for about 3 years, there was recurring source of funding for it through contractors' excise tax, and like an abandoned property facility with the state. That since went away. And so every year, housing advocates, you know, we come to the Capitol and we talk about the need, and we'd love to see a recurring source of funding for something like that. I know the legislators seem to really like that program. It's our only state funded opportunity really for housing that is in the affordable space. Do you have any thoughts on how we can get a recurring source of funding for something like that, so we're not necessarily coming back, you know, every year asking for the same thing, but we kind of get a base going, and people can start building on that funding source as one of the layers within their project that they're working on?
Well, you're obviously well more versed on this than I am. Was this the Appropriations Committee you'd come to talk to about this fund in the past?
Not the Appropriations Committee, but when we do our day at the legislature, it's really the leading issue that the housing advocacy group that we're part of talks about. And, you know, we've met with many members of the legislature over the last 10 years about it. And you know, every year it just seems to be it's something that isn't funded really. It's just a question, you know, $3 to $5 million. Where's it going to come from? I would think that we could come up with something, you know, that's recurring, so we can start building from there.
So give me a little history. When it was originally established, it was had a sunset clause, or it was monies were coming from contractor excise tax, you mentioned?
Yeah.
So how was it why did it fade away?
That's a great question. That happened under the Dugard administration, and
Right.
I wasn't privy as to why they chose to stop funding that housing piece. I think it was
Okay.
part of Build South Dakota, if you remember that. I think that was the overall package, and there were a few different. There was an education piece, housing piece to it, and
Okay.
the housing got dropped. So, I mean, the Housing Opportunity Funds is still there with South Dakota Housing, but every year the question of how's this thing going to be funded is always out there. So
And it hasn't been funded.
it has been funded. Yeah, I don't know if it's coming from general funds or how
Okay.
exactly, if South Dakota Housing is moving funds from one pot to another, but
Okay.
we're not moving forward. We're kind of on life
Okay.
support with that important program. I think every housing provider in the state would say it's the best source of funding because it's really flexible, it's
Okay.
state funded, and it's just works. It fits into all the different boxes that we need across the state.
Okay. All right. I've got a better picture on it. I need to do some homework on that. You can
Okay,
provide me with some more information.
sure.
We'll see how this all works out for me personally, but with a change in speaker, with a new speaker of the House this year,
Hmm.
I may end up back on Appropriations Committee.
Okay,
And I've actually got an opportunity to be chairman of appropriations for the next session. So you
fantastic.
don't want to get over my skis, but
Right.
first I got to get reelected. Then the
Right.
speaker has to get elected, and then I have to be named to the committee. But that's my goal anyway. So keep me up to
Wonderful.
date on this.
I will. Well, in closing, I like to think we're not all just policy people or, work people. We have personal lives, right? And
Right.
I'm curious for you, like, is there a book you've read, over the last legislative session in the summer, or a Netflix series or a film or something that you've enjoyed that's maybe buoyed your spirits or inspired you that people might not otherwise know?
Well, that's a great question. I've got one sitting on my desk I'm reading, and it's an oldie but a goodie.
Okay, yes, The Art of War. Very
Yeah,
good.
I think it's been very appropriate for a lot of things I do and politically. But
Yeah,
so that one I'm working my way through. I'd never read it. I mean, it's been around a long time. Have you
right.
read it?
I
Have
have,
you read?
yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
I actually
Um,
listened to it.
there
A
you
little bit
go.
easier.
And I'm currently reading a book titled Call Me Ted. It's a life of Ted Turner.
Okay, okay,
And so what's interesting about that is I grew up in the outdoor advertising business here with Derby Outdoor Advertising was a
okay.
family business.
Uh-huh.
And Ted Turner's dad and him were in the outdoor advertising business. That was the start of his launch
Okay,
into the
okay.
Superstation, CNN,
Sure.
owning the Atlanta Braves,
Yeah,
and all of that good stuff. And then being a Buffalo rancher and all that
yeah.
good stuff.
That's what
So,
we know him from in this part of the world, certainly in the ranching community.
yeah,
Well, listen, Representative, I thank you so much for your time, and I thank you for your service. I know you're getting more out of it than you're giving, but from my standpoint, you give a lot, and so I really appreciate that, and appreciate the thoughtfulness that you go into the session with, and your work here in the community. I think you're one of those people that really gets out there and wants to understand what people are experiencing, what the needs are, and I know you've tracked real closely with Habitat over the years and understand what we're doing. And that means a
right.
lot to me. So thank you.
Thank
Let's
you.
stay in touch, and all the best to you as things wrap up here with the election cycle. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you in Pierre.
Thanks. And thanks for all your good work.
You're welcome.
All
You
right.
take care.
Take care. Bye.